Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Camille had already been living in the orphanage for more than 6 months. The 13-year-old girl kept herself apart all this time. She did not want to come into contact with her peers and classmates. For this, she was nicknamed Bun. Camille was not at all offended by this offensive nickname, as she realized that it was her own fault that now she is called such a girl. When she got to the orphanage, she kept thinking, was it right that she volunteered to live in this institution? After all, Camille told the class teacher about her life, and the teacher sounded the alarm. And all was that Camille had divided her life into 2 parts. Until the age of 11, the girl grew up a happy child. She was cherished by her mom, and dad tried his best they could to buy fashionable things. In general, the parents wanted their daughter to not need anything. And then something happened, and everything went wrong. Initially, the parents between themselves began to fight often, after which the girl's mother often cried. Then he stopped coming home. The father slept over. Camille realized that there was an unhealthy atmosphere in the house, and it would not end well. However, Camille couldn't understand why her parents were fighting, and so she asked her mother, "Why do you and her father fight so often? Do you really want to know?" "I do. I want us to live like we used to, happily and as a family. And I don't want you to cry." "Then go and ask your father why we fight with him." The girl nodded to her mother in response, and when her father came, she turned to him with the same question. The father looked at his daughter carefully, and then called her back to the children's room and put her on a chair, and sat opposite him. The man nervously ran his palm through his hair and then said, "Daughter, you are not so small, and some things should understand. Anyway, I've fallen out of love with your mother, and I want to divorce her. I wanted to talk to you about it earlier, but I didn't dare. Divorcing my mom won't affect our relationship. I just won't live here, but I'll visit you." "Dad, is there another woman in your life?" "That's a serious question. I'll be honest with you. You're right. I have a woman I love and want to live with. You've made your point. I don't want to talk to you anymore," roughly said the girl and rushed to the bathroom, where she gave vent to tears. Now Camille understood her mother, who had been crying a lot lately. After this conversation with her father, a few days passed, and the man soon packed his things and left their family. Camille became withdrawn after Papa's departure. She was incredibly hurt that her father had betrayed her and her mom for another woman. And the girl's mother, after she was abandoned by her husband, just sobbed and cursed her fate. At first, Camille's father visited her, coming once a week to school after lessons. However, Camille did not talk to him and tried to get away from her father as soon as possible. This continued for a month, and the man began to come to school less and less often. Meanwhile, the girl's mother, in order to somehow survive the betrayal, began to impose on strong drinks. Even not perfectly understood that the mother degenerates every day. And when once again the father appeared at school, the girl told him everything and asked him to talk to her mother. The man looked sadly at his daughter and said that he would not do this. And then he added, "Your mom is a grown woman and should understand what she is doing. And I also want to say that now I will rarely visit you. You don't spoil me much with your visits anyway. There's a reason for that. I have a woman I live with who's expecting a baby in the near future, and now I'm gonna have a lot on my mind. You must realize that a baby needs a lot of attention." "That's a great thing to say. You're telling your own daughter. So I don't want to be taken care of. Get out then, and you cannot appear in my life at all." Barely holding back her sobs, the girl said, "I understand that you are offended at the moment. Be patient a little. As soon as the baby is born and grows up, I will visit you more often. You should be happy because you'll have a sister I'll introduce you to. I've told you everything. Go away, and don't show up with anyone. I don't want to meet anyone. I hate you and despise you." The girl said quickly and hurried home. Camille couldn't wait to cry. but she didn't want to do it in front of her father. As soon as Camille got home, she rushed to her room and burst into tears. She wanted her mother to be there to tell her about her conversation with her father. However, when her mother came home drunk, the girl lost all desire to tell her mother anything. A few days passed. Camille came home and was very surprised to find the front door unlocked. Camille remembered exactly that she had closed the door. The girl entered the room and saw that her mother was sitting in the kitchen with tea and a cat on the table. Camille involuntarily wrinkled her nose and said to Mama, "Are you drinking again? For some reason, it wasn't at work that I got fired. Can you imagine, my daughter? Such a valuable employee was kicked out of the company. What are we going to do now? I'll look for a new job. Don't worry, everything will be fine. It's all your father's fault. He left us to our fate." Camille hoped her mother would go to look for a new job the next day, but she didn't. The girl's mother drank heavily for almost a week while she had money. When the finances ran out, she started selling gold jewelry first, and then she started selling things. This went on for some time. Camille tried her best to convince her mother to stop drinking, but she, being drunk, drove away her daughter. Camille realized that soon they would not be able to buy bread. The girl did not know what to do. Camille began to feel hungry all the time, as her mother rarely cooked at home. And lately her mother began to leave in the evening and come back in the morning and again drunk. That's when Camille decided to talk to Emily's class teacher. She told the teacher about her life. The teacher listened attentively to the school drill and then said to the girl, "You can't live like this. I will try to talk to your mom, but I am afraid it will be a waste of time. The only thing I can offer you is to live in an orphanage, where you will be properly taken care of. Maybe the termination of parental rights will make your mom reconsider her views on life, and she will give up her addiction. And don't get me wrong that after your story I will have to contact the guardianship authorities anyway, because I have to respond to the fact that my student does not finish her meals and often stays home alone at night." The very next day, Emily tried to talk to Camille's mother, but the conversation did not work, as the landlady was in an inadequate state. The teacher made another attempt 2 days later, but the situation was repeated. And then the teacher detained the girl after lessons and told her it was useless to talk to your mom. "I ask you not to take offense at me, but I'm appealing to the guardianship authorities. I just don't have a way out. I'm not offended. I've been thinking about your words for a long time, and it seems to me that I would be much better off in an orphanage now. You see, I'm just afraid that I'll go down a crooked path and start stealing from stores so that I won't feel hungry." Good for you for thinking that way. Don't despair. Maybe when you get to the orphanage, your mom will realize that she might lose her own daughter. And soon Camille showed up at the orphanage. Now she was sitting there thinking about her mother and whether it was right for her to want to live in this institution. Camille was distracted from her thoughts by a woman's voice that said, "Sitting alone again as your peers rampage outside." The girl turned around and looked at the woman with a smile. It was Evelyn, the cleaning lady. Camille had become friends with her. A month after coming here, all the children at the orphanage thought Evelyn was a woman. Camille had a different opinion of the janitor. She liked it when the janitor affectionately called her by her first name and asked her how her day was going. Evelyn walked over to the girl and sat down next to her. The older woman already knew Camille's story. For what reasons the child had ended up in the orphanage, the cleaning lady herself did not understand what made her feel special toward this withdrawn girl. And now, seeing the pensive Camille, she quietly turned to her. What she was dreaming about at the moment, honestly, about my mom in my life. Tell me if it's not a secret. I've been waiting a long time for my mom to come and take me away from here. But she never even visited me once. And now I was wondering if I was right to want to live in an orphanage. And now I realize that I was right. I don't need the pits at all. And I have an aversion to her. I feel like pretty soon I'm just gonna hate her. You can't say that about your own mother. You know, I grew up in an orphanage too. My mom gave me up when I was a baby. And at first, I had the same thoughts as you. But as I'd grown up, I've changed my mind drastically. Tell me why. Interested? Camille asked. I'll try to explain it to you with my own example. As soon as I left the orphanage, I entered medical school. When I graduated, I met a young man named Roman. This guy started courting me, and soon we both realized that we loved each other. Soon we had a wedding with him. And then we had our firstborn son, who was named Constantine. And now I come to the most important part. Why did I stop hating my mother? It's because with my husband I lived in peace and harmony. We had a wonderful son. You see, I've been a happy woman all these years. And now you just imagine that if my mother had not given birth to me, I would not have experienced any of this, because I would not be in this world. And that's why I am grateful to my mother for giving me life. And let my mother left me in the hospital, but I do not blame her, because it is quite possible that she had good reasons for it. But you know my story, don't you? My mom's only good reason was to drink hard liquor. Your mom slipped up. She's a weak person. Not everyone can be a strong person. Don't just hate her. Believe that you'll grow up. You'll have a happy life. And you will thank your mom more than once for living in this world. Smiling, said the old woman. I don't know. Maybe you are right about that. And tell me, why do you work as a cleaner if you have a nursing education? That's a separate story. At one time I worked as a nurse in a children's clinic. When the years passed, I retired, but continued to work. But soon the management told me that it was necessary to give way to young staff. I had to quit. I did not regret it, as I had a loving husband with me. And my son at that time got married and left for another city. And after I was retired and sitting at home, my husband passed away a year later. And why did you go back to work after that? I don't understand. Sitting alone in four walls is not a particularly pleasant occupation. You're so young, you wouldn't realize it. I just started to feel lonely. And then my son took out a mortgage to buy an apartment. He needed help with the money. So I decided that I'd rather work than just stay at home beating around the bush. And now I've been working here for 4 years, and I've never regretted it. Why don't the children from the orphanage treat you well? I think that this is a question you should ask your peers, not me, Evelyn said with a smile. And then she added, and to find out the answers of boys and girls, you need to talk to them, not stay away from them. Years of life went by. Everything was also kept aloof from peers. Both the boys and the orphanage staff were used to it by now, except that Evelyn was dissatisfied with the fact that Camille was not a sociable child and often talked to the girl about it. And the girl, in turn, in response, only kept silent. Time flew by. And now Camille has already turned 18 years old. It was time for the girl to start living on her own. And the day before Camille had to leave the orphanage, she was approached by a cleaning lady who said, "You're starting a new epoch in your life. You must be careful, because living on your own, you can make a lot of mistakes. I know that the state gave you a one-room apartment somewhere in the periphery, but that's okay. The main thing is that you have your own corner. The only place you've been allocated is there. There's no furniture. I already thought of that. I'll buy you a kitchen table with 4 stools. It'll be a housewarming gift. A bed and a dresser. I'll give them from my son's room. He doesn't need this furniture, but it'll be good for you. I'll give you some of the kitchen utensils. Of course, you've got to give me something to eat. When I decide to visit you, if you don't mind, I'll always be glad to have you here. You've been so supportive while I've been here. I'll be eternally grateful. Oh, don't give me that big talk. And what kind of gratitude is there to be thankful for? Why don't you tell me what you're gonna do? How are you gonna get out of here? I want to be an announcer, and I'm gonna try to get into college. And of course, I'll look for part-time work in the evenings to make a living. And if you don't get in, believe me, it happens a lot. I'll get a job, and in a year I'll try again. And soon Camille moved into a studio apartment. She quickly got settled in and immediately got to know her neighbor. It was a middle-aged woman whose name was Wendy. Soon Camille tried to enter the institute, but disappointment awaited her. The girl missed a few points. After she found out that she was unlucky with the enrollment, she came home in a bad mood. She wanted to cry with grief. Camille only sat down on the bed as she received a call on her cell phone from Evelyn, who asked how things were going. The girl tried not to cry and mouthed, "I didn't get in. And I had so much faith in my abilities." That says what? That you shouldn't be overconfident. Just write that you're going to make your beautiful face raw and put it aside for the moment. Otherwise, I'll scold you like a little girl who went to the wrong potty. The old woman said sternly, "Do you know how to cheer up?" Laughing, the girl said, "That's great. What are your plans now?" "Well, I'm going to look for a job. I need finances to live on." A few days later, the girl got a job in a flower pavilion. The manager at first worked together with Camille, helping her to learn the art of how to beautifully design a bouquet. And after a couple of weeks, the director of the pavilion, Jenna, approved the girl's actions and said that now she could work independently. Camille was happy because she was praised by the director. And so the first day came when Camille went out to work at the pavilion. One girl was very worried, but the first shift went out without any misunderstandings. And on the second day, Camille went to work without worrying that she would not be able to fulfill her duties. The first month flew by as Camille worked in the flower pavilion. The girl enjoyed going to work. One day, a young man came to see her and immediately complimented Camille on her good looks. Camille often heard such words from representatives of the stronger sex and calmly treated them. But this young man said the compliment in a special way, and the girl looked at him with interest. Meanwhile, the guy said, "Can I buy a bouquet of flowers that will reflect your beauty?" Camille, hearing this, laughed and handed the visitor a bouquet of decorative daisies. The young man, seeing the flowers, also laughed and said, "You obviously underestimate yourself. And to be honest, I need the bouquet to give to my friend's girlfriend. It's her birthday today." Camille looked around at the ready bouquets and then chose gladioli. She handed the flowers to the young man and said that such a bouquet should be to the girl's taste. The guy took the mustache and paid and then asked permission to see Camille off in the evening. Camille was not ready for this and therefore refused. Soon the visitor left. The girl had worked her shift and was getting ready to close the pavilion when she saw again the guy who had complimented her today. She looked questioningly at the young man and asked him if he needed another bouquet. "No flowers today. I just want to see you off." "But I already refused your request." "All right. Then sell me a bouquet of white roses." Camille complied with the visitor's request, and he took the flowers and put them on the counter, saying that the roses were bought for her. And after that, the guy left the pavilion. The girl was surprised by the stranger's behavior, and at that moment thought that the young man was strange. After this incident, a couple of days passed, and Camille already closed the pavilion and was going to go home. Suddenly, she was called by a lover of daisies. "Would you give me a couple of minutes?" Camille looked at the stranger and recognized him as the man who had recently given her roses. The young man stood near the foreign car and elbowed her. The girl asked what the guy wanted, and the one after her words came up to her and answered that he could not wait to get acquainted with the beauty. Camille did not know how to act in this situation and therefore said, "Let's not do this, and I disgust you." The young man said in surprise, "I didn't say that. I'm just not used to it. Getting acquainted like that. You're putting a price on yourself," sarcastically said the stranger. And then he added, "How long do you have to be groomed to tell me your name?" "All right, you're on. My name is Camille. Now we're talking. And my name is Stephen. Let's get you a ride in the car." "If you want a ride, I'm not getting in the car on foot." Stephen nodded and followed the girl. The young man told different anecdotes about Camille laughed. The girl noted to herself that the new acquaintance was an excellent conversationalist and easy to communicate with, and soon the couple approached Camille's house. Camille thanked the guy for seeing her off, but Stephen stopped her and asked for permission to take a leisurely walk with her again tomorrow. The girl, after some thought, agreed. When she got home, Camille involuntarily thought about the man. It suddenly seemed to her that perhaps this man was her soulmate. And then she pushed these thoughts away from her, realizing that she did not know Stephen at all to allow such thoughts. All the following week, the young man met the girl from work almost every day. From him, she learned that he was 24 years old and studying at the institute. The guy also said that he lived on his own in a 2-room apartment. Stephen said that his father is engaged in business and his mother is a housewife. When Camille heard all this, she said with a smile, "You're just like a major." "That's right. I think I am, too, and it doesn't offend me. Why did I tell you all about me? You haven't told me anything about your own person. I'm also interested to know who your parents are, why you work in a flower pavilion and not study." Camille looked at the guy and said that she was a pupil of an orphanage. She did not tell him the reason why she had gotten there. She was uncomfortable to admit that her mom consumed strong drinks. Stephen, when he heard that Camille was from the orphanage, looked at her in a strange way. This look was noticed by the girl, and she asked what was wrong. The guy at the same moment smiled welcomingly and said that everything was fine, and then invited the interlocutor to come to visit him. Camille refused. It seemed to her that it was too early to be alone with Stephen. The young man, when he heard that Camille did not want to visit, said reproachfully, "And I thought we trusted each other. But it turned out to be completely different. I get the feeling you think I'm a monster. You're wrong. You're a nice guy, but I'd rather get some fresh air than sit in an apartment. But it's better to get some fresh air than to sit in an apartment. You and I have plenty of time. Take me up on my offer. By the way, I have a large soap collection. I know my hobby sounds weird, but I collect soap. Interesting." With a smile said a girl and thought, "And why not really come to visit? Well, at least for an hour." The young man, seeing the doubts of the interlocutor, immediately said, "I'll get you home safe and sound, and you will choose the soap you like. You can even have several and take it from me as president." The girl looked at Stephen and agreed. The couple got into the car and the car started. Camille was riding in a foreign car for the first time. She was inspecting the interior. The young man was discreetly observing it. When the girl turned her attention to the road, the guy asked if she liked the car. Camille enthusiastically concluded that the car was wonderful. She added that it must be very expensive. Stephen voiced the cost, and the interlocutor, ouch, nodded. The driver, seeing her reaction, laughed. Soon the couple was already in Stephen's apartment. The girl immediately assessed the atmosphere and softly mumbled that everything here is arranged with taste. The young man smiled and replied that it was the merit of his mother. And then the owner of the apartment offered the guests to drink a glass of sparkling wine. But Camille flatly refused. Then Stephen opened the bar and took out a bottle of liquor from there. He dug it out and splashed the liquid into the shot glasses with the words, "I bought it when I suggested you buy it from Aristov. This drink is not quoted in the orphanage. You must be used to Belenka." The girl from these words of the guy shuddered as from a blow, and sharply said that she does not use strong drinks at all, and then said that if he once again allowed himself to talk to her in this way, then their communication on this note stops. The guy smiled in response and asked his guest to relax, promising that he would not allow himself to do that again. And then Stephen poured himself a strong drink and emptied the glass. The girl, seeing this, involuntarily wrinkled her nose. Then she asked to see the soap collection. The owner of the apartment cordially agreed to fulfill Camille's request and invited her into the bathroom, where the original shelf on the entire wall was pierced, on which were arranged pieces of soap. The girl began to look at the collection with curiosity. Meanwhile, the young man had left the bathroom and had another 100 grams of hard liquor before returning to his visit. Stephen watched as Camille stood on tiptoe and took out first one bar of soap, which she brought to her nose and inhaled the aroma, and then the next. The man felt at that moment A desire to possess this girl right now at this moment enveloped him, and he wrapped his arms around Camille and his hands and turns her to face him, and then starts to tear off the girl's blouse. Camille screamed out loudly for him to leave her alone. However, the guy picked up the guest in his arms and carried her to the couch. Camille was already well aware of what the owner of the apartment was going to do. And then she screamed, "Stop, please. I don't want it to happen like this. After all, I haven't been intimate with a man once before. Not to build for myself, not to cross the road from the orphanage. And they've been doing it there since they were 12. Just be a decent girl now, and we'll give each other pleasure." Camille tried to push the young man away, but the forces were unequal, and after a while Stephen lay on his back and breathed often. And the girl, tucking her legs under her belly, barely audible, was crying. The owner of the apartment, literally after a few minutes from breathing, said, "And you did not deceive me. It turned out, in fact, pious diva, but you pass. You liked it too, didn't you? But tell me the truth. I will now rest, and we can continue." After these words, the girl jumped to her feet and ran to the kitchen, where she grabbed a knife. As soon as Stephen began to approach her, she screamed exhaustedly that she would take her own life if he came near her. The landlord snorted and calmly replied, "I don't need to touch you. I've had mine. Now you can go to all four sides. By the way, you can choose a few bars of soap from the collection. That's your pleasure fee. If you want to meet me, you'll find my address here. Oh, and one more thing. Don't go to the police because my father has connections there. You're only hurting yourself by doing this." The girl looked at the guy with hatred and quickly got dressed, then ran out of the apartment. Camille knew that it was a long way for her to get home, and it would be better to take transportation. But she felt like people knew what had just happened and were looking at her with judgment. So Camille decided that she would get home on her own. Soon the girl was already in the apartment, where she immediately rushed into the bathroom. She wanted to wash herself off with the touch of Stephen's hands. Camille rubbed her body with exasperation, silent. Then Camille sank to the bottom of the tub and sobbed bitterly. The next day, Camille asked the director of the flower pavilion for a day off. The girl told the supervisor that she felt disgusting. The supervisor advised her to call a doctor and said she would work by herself for a few days, while Camille is not feeling well. The girl has been manifesting at home for several days. She did not answer her neighbor's calls, and also the cleaner of the orphanage. Camille just wanted to be at home for a while and hoped that she would succeed. However, Evelyn thought quite differently, who was concerned that the ward was not answering her calls, and the elderly woman initially went to the girl's workplace, and after finding out why Camille was absent from the pavilion, she had already gone to her home. The elderly woman rang the doorbell for a long time, and then, realizing she wouldn't get that one opened, said loudly, "I know you're home. If you don't open the door, I'll break it down, and you know very well that I will." Camille, knowing the temper of the cleaning lady, I realized that Evelyn would do as the girl said, opened the door and saw the worried face, the elderly woman. Camille smiled tiredly and invited the guest to pass. Evelyn looked at the wards and sternly asked what had happened. Camille did not want to tell the cleaning lady anything, and so she lied to her that she had quarreled with a young man. The guests looked at the girl with amazement and muttered, "That's the guy you're killing for. The one you just met. I don't understand you. Did you fall in love so quickly? Let's go to the kitchen and have a cup of tea, and you can tell me all about it." Camille realized that Evelyn would have to lie, so she quickly made up stories. She told the elderly woman that she had quarreled with the young man because he had forbidden her to work. The guest, hearing the explanation, only laughed and remained silent. "That's a silly reason for a quarrel. You should have told your boyfriend that you need something to live on. And if he's going to support you, let him do it. I'm not gonna tell him anything. I'm just gonna leave it at that. Maybe I could have a mother-son talk with him. No way. Better tell me how things are going at the orphanage." The landlady spoke, trying to distract Evelyn from the dangerous topic. Time moved slowly. Camille went to work and then went straight home. Stephen did not appear in her life. What was the girl glad of? She wanted to cut this man out of her life completely and never think of him. So Camille got up in the morning as usual. She had to go to work. As Camille felt sick, she rushed to the restroom, where she immediately threw up. The girl was puzzled as to what had happened to her, but immediately she tried to put all thoughts about her health aside as she had to get ready for work. Camille hoped that the nausea would go away during the day, but it did not. The young woman came home irritated after a day of work. She was depressed about her own physical condition and did not even eat dinner that day. She went to bed early. The next day, the same thing happened again. The girl felt nauseous all the time. After work, she went to the store to buy milk, which she loved very much and allowed herself to buy on rare occasions. Camille went to the counter and wanted to take a bottle. She realized that if she took even a sip of milk, she would immediately vomit. Camille did not buy anything and went home. When she got home, the girl sat down on the bed. The doorbell rang. Camille opened it and saw a neighbor who was holding fried pies on a plate. The woman unceremoniously entered the apartment and spoke. "I want to treat you to some baked goods. I happened to buy fuel milk today." "Oh, don't even remind me of milk. It makes me sick at one word," said the girl, looking at her saliva. "I don't understand you. You've always loved milk, and now you're sick of it. I've been sick of it since yesterday. I thought it would go away today, but it didn't. How's your stool?" "It's fine. I'm walking. It's not poisoning. You know, sweetheart, all your symptoms indicate that you're pregnant. I have a pretty good idea who the father of this baby is. I've seen your young man out the window a few times with you, only now he's gone missing. If I were you, I'd go to the drugstore and get a test. I'm not a gynecologist, but trust me, you're definitely in the right place. Don't be silly. I won't drink tea because I'm tired at work. I'm sleepy." With a slightly noticeable irritation, muttered the landlady of the apartment, who at this minute wanted Wendy to go to her room. The neighbor, hearing that she was being beaten about missing, resentfully pressed her lips together and quickly left. As soon as the woman left the apartment, Camille began to pack quickly. She only wanted to buy a pregnancy test after Wendy's words. The girl was able to allow the thought that she could have gotten pregnant by the rascal. Camille bought the test and persevered with the appropriate procedure. The girl was very worried. She absolutely did not want to give birth to a child from Stephen, who had done such a thing to her. When the test showed positive results, Camille squatted down and cried desperately. The young woman did not know what to do in this situation. The first thing that came to mind was to talk to Evelyn and tell her everything honestly. Camille received a call from the cleaning lady and asked her to come to visit her tomorrow. The elderly woman readily agreed and asked what to take for tea. Camille replied that there was no need to bring any guests since she had Krieger. Evelyn wanted to ask her mentee something else, but she said that the whole conversation would take place tomorrow. The next day in the evening, the old woman was already sitting at Camille's house. The landlady, with her head down, told how she had visited Stephen and how it had all ended. Evelyn listened attentively to Camille and asked what she was going to do. Camille tearfully said she wanted to terminate the pregnancy. When the guest heard this, she said softly, "And you are sure of your decision? Very often it happens that after such procedures, women can no longer have children. But we have modern medicine, and I have nothing to fear. Just understand, if I give birth to this child, this baby will remind me all the time what he did. I am afraid that I hate this child. I'm also afraid that the child will inherit the father's genes and be just as much of a rascal in life." Wait, this is where it all comes together. Is that too much to be afraid of? Let me get this straight. What about medicine? You know, there's a saying that goes, there's a silver lining. That's the case with you. Let's move on. That the child will resemble his father, but it won't. As soon as you put the baby to the breast to feed, you'll realize that this baby is yours alone. Now, about genes. What do genes have to do with it? You're gonna raise the baby. What you put into it is what you'll reap. I'm not in any way trying to talk you into keeping the baby. I'm just trying to make you realize that you have to make these decisions consciously, not in haste, when emotions are running high. And that's what you're going through right now. My advice to you is to go to a gynecologist and make sure that you are pregnant, since tests can also give wrong results. If the pregnancy is confirmed, then check with the doctor until what term you can think about whether to keep the baby or not. And only after that, make a decision. After a while, Camille had already been to the women's clinic and knew for sure that she was in an interesting position. The young woman had contradictory feelings. On the one hand, she was pleased that life had begun inside her. But on the other hand, when she thought of Stephen, she felt disgusted with the child. Camille procrastinated for a long time and then made the choice that she would give birth to this baby, and it would be a joy in her life. The young woman was informed about her decision by the orphanage worker, who was happy to hear the news and immediately said that she would give the stroller as a gift as a grandmother. After Evelyn learned that the ward would give birth, she came to visit her and from the threshold said that it was necessary to have a serious talk. Camille was surprised at this and invited the elderly woman into the guest room and sat down and looked at the landlady carefully and only then spoke. Having a baby is good, but you need to think about the financial side. You have to persuade your manager to make you an official salesperson. That way you'll get an allowance. And if she refuses, find a way to get the director of the flower pavilion to agree. You'll need that money to live on in the future. You know, I don't just give advice. After all, I've lived most of my life already. And please don't put off this conversation with your supervisor until later. Camille, after this conversation with Evelyn, turned to her supervisor. Jenna promised to think about it. And now a month has passed since that conversation, and the supervisor has remained silent on the subject. Camille again talked to her supervisor about official employment. Jenna promised that she would do it in a week. However, a month passed, but the supervisor did not lift a finger on the matter. And when Camille tried to talk about it again, the supervisor pointed to the young woman's slightly bulging belly and said, "Do you want me to pay you benefits? But that's not going to happen. Why would I transfer my money to nowhere?" "You don't say." "What do you mean, nowhere? This money will be a great help to us. As soon as the baby's old enough, I'm going back to work for you." My answer to you: no, you work one more week and then I'm firing you. You're a good girl. Yeah, she's helping the unmarried. And I'm not going to. Camille was stunned by Jenna's answer. Camille seemed to have developed a good relationship with her supervisor. After all, when the supervisor asked to stay longer after the workday, the girl willingly complied with her request. And now that Camille had been refused, she was extremely offended that she had received such a reward for all her hard work. Camille recounted this conversation with the director of Evelyn's flower pavilion. The elderly woman was outraged after hearing the news. She wanted to go and talk to Jenna herself and tell the manager that she was acting illegally. That's one thing. And secondly, decent people don't do that. Camille talked the old lady out of it. She said, "You won't get anything out of it. I worked unofficially, and that says it all. It's my own fault for not having thought of this earlier, to formalize an employment contract." Soon Camille was out of work. The young woman was handed as she realized that the salary she received after she stopped working in the flower pavilion would not be enough for a long time. So Camille began to pound various structures in order to find some kind of work before the payment of maternity benefits. However, she was denied everywhere, and seeing that she is in an interesting position, and still the young woman found a job. True, it paid a pittance. The girl had to hand out advertising booklets on the street. Camille realized that she earns a pittance here, but at the moment she was happy about it. Time flew by, and now the young woman gave birth to a baby girl, whom she named Vanessa. Camille fondly felt the little bundle and mentally thanked the cleaning lady, who had made her realize that the decision should be made without any violent thoughts. Camille realized that it was only thanks to that conversation with the technician that she had kept the baby under her heart. And now that baby was born from the maternity ward. Camille was greeted by Evelyn. The elderly woman accepted the small package from the nurse's hands and suddenly cried. Camille was puzzled why the cleaning lady was crying now and asked her about it. "You should be happy. Are you crying? Why? I'm glad you made the right decision at the right time. And now I answer to my granddaughter." Time has slowly moved on. Camille enjoyed learning the role of a mother. She was busy practicing with her daughter. All the motherly duties she lovingly performed. And even when Vanessa switched from day to night, it didn't work for the young woman to have to adjust to a child. It had been a month since Camille had become a mom. And at this point, Camille clearly realized that the allowance was completely inadequate for living. Her daughter needed to buy formula, which cost a lot of money, and she also had to buy shipping, oils, baby soap, and other baby products for the baby. The young woman was at a loss, and it was the first time she had not paid her utility bill. Another 2 months passed. Camille lost weight during this time, as she denied herself food, only to be fed. Camille's daughter helped Evelyn, but only in small amounts. The elderly woman saw perfectly well how difficult it was for her ward, and one day a conversation took place between the cleaning lady and Camille. Camille said to the technician in despair, "I don't know what to do. I was already thinking of putting my daughter in an orphanage for a while and visiting her there. And as soon as she's a little older, I'll take her out of there and get a job in the meantime. That's the stupidest decision I've ever heard. If you do that, you'll lose Vanessa forever. You'd have to give up your parental rights if you did that. Do you even think about what you're saying? I don't know how to make ends meet." With tears in her eyes, said the girl, and immediately added, "Other children at this age have cribs. My daughter still sleeps in the stroller you gave us. The crib is not the most important thing. I'll try to give you a little more money. I don't feel comfortable accepting finances from you anymore. I don't know when I'll be able to pay you back. I'd like to get a job, and then everything will change." After this conversation, about 2 weeks passed, and Evelyn came to visit Camille. The old woman went into the kitchen and put a box with a long cake on the table. The landlady looked at her guest with bewilderment and asked what kind of celebration. The cleaning lady smiled and said, "Celebrating my dismissal from work. I've become too old to carry big buckets of water. And now I've decided to retire. And the salary at the orphanage is tiny. I'll be with Vanessa from now on. And you're trying to get a job, but you still need to help your son. I haven't forgotten about that. They'll cut back on their rations. There's no other option. Although there is one other option, which is to go to the father, establish paternity with DNA, and then demand child support from him. Don't ever say that to me again. I'll never go to what? This is my child and mine alone. Consider me." Vanessa started from the wind in the field with a challenge, exclaimed Camille. "You see, so there's only one way out. I sit busy and you look for a job. Did I like the way you stood up to Stephen just now?" Evelyn said with a smile. A few days later, Camille got a job as a salesman in a small market not far from home. The young woman was attracted by the fact that the market had a convenient schedule. It was necessary to come to 7 o'clock, and the Labor Day ended at 14:00. The only thing that marred the girl was not particularly high wages, about which she told Evelyn. The old woman said in response that she found something to be upset about. "Your salary is higher than the one I received when I worked in the orphanage." Soon Camille went to work. She was a little uneasy, as she had never worked with weighty goods. However, her employer explained everything in detail and spent the day with her, helping the girl to cope with selling vegetables. And so already Camille worked for 3 days at the market. Here the girl met her neighbor Molly, who was selling fruit. The women talked to each other, and Molly in one of the conversations unexpectedly dropped that Camille had hired an employer for nothing. The woman looked at her interlocutor with surprise and asked her why she had said that. Molly embarrassed Cashin, and then, waving her hand, spoke out. And what will I hide it from you? All the same, after all, the truth will tell you others. The thing is that your boss, Nancy, very often changes salespeople. Regular customers will tell you that soon enough. I've had a couple of people tell me that there's a new salesperson again, but I didn't pay much attention to it. And why Nancy and the salesman do not linger. The answer is simple, constant shortages. At Sveta's, the longest that the sellers have worked is 4 months, as far as I remember. A few days after this conversation, there was an unpleasant incident at Camille's workplace. Toward the end of the workday, as usual, Nancy and her husband arrived to pick up the proceeds. Camille counted out the money and held it out to the supervisor, who looked at the financials and grudgingly said that the amount was too small. Camille narrowed her eyes and replied that they had overpriced vegetables, and customers often left for competitors. Nancy, hearing this, said that one should be able to interest the person who approached the goods and not rely on high prices. The businesswoman then approached the vegetables and inspected them meticulously. Nancy then saw some affected tomatoes. She took out the tomatoes and placed them in front of Camille. The woman looked at the woman perplexed and said quietly, "Vegetables have a way of spoiling. It's not my fault. I agree with you on that. But spoiled goods should be weighed and recorded and kept separately. But I did. I just didn't have time to put these tomatoes aside," Camille said, and quickly took out a notebook in which she wrote down the spoiled vegetables. The girl held out her notes to Nancy. The businesswoman took a quick look at the notebook and spoke in a stern voice. "All this will be deducted from your wages. And now these tomatoes can be taken to your home. How's that? And yesterday's game was cucumbers. I gave them to you. Are you going to take them out of my paycheck too? But that's not fair." Almost crying, said the girl. "It's not for me to teach you how to work with goods. You did not rush to me, so you should do your job. If you see that you have a spoilage of this or that kind of vegetables, you try to block it. From this day on, you are responsible for all spoiled tomatoes, cucumbers, and so on." Camille was walking home after a day's work in high spirits. As soon as she entered the apartment, Evelyn approached her and raised her index finger to her lips. That meant it was worth talking in a whisper. It meant it was worth talking in whispers since Vanessa was asleep. The old woman, seeing Camille in a bad mood, immediately realized that the girl was in trouble. She asked Camille to go to the kitchen and asked her what was wrong. The girl took out the tomatoes and put them on the table. And only then she told what had happened. And at the end of her narrative, she added, "I don't know how to weigh people. I am ashamed to do it. I will not hide that I add a few grams somewhere. I was advised to do so by a neighbor who sells nearby. But how can I answer the customers if I have a kilogram of tomatoes, for example, will rot? Do not be upset. From work a month and see what salary you get. If it will be pennies, then there's nothing to stay there." A month went by and an audit was done. Nancy informed Camille that there was a shortage and told her the amount. The girl was already ready for it, so without too many questions, the businesswoman offered to deduct the shortage. Then she informed Nancy that she was no longer working for her. The next day, Camille again went to look for work at the market where she worked. The girl did not want to go, and that was one reason not to go out with Nancy. Camille decided that it was possible to find a position as a vendor at the bazaar, which was a few stops away from her home. The girl remembered Evelyn's advice, and so she wanted to get a job selling piece goods. Camille was lucky right away. She saw several advertisements at the entrance to the market for sellers. Camille approached one employer, and he said he would be happy to hire her. The girl immediately asked about the salary, and the man voiced the amount. Camille has been drinking since morning, looked at the entrepreneur, and said that this is paltry money. The employer smirked and said, "I do not know you, my dear, so there will be a trial period. If we work out, well, in the sense that there will be no shortages, then in a couple of months your salary will increase. That's what all the entrepreneurs do around here. Maybe you should check it out." The girl sighed dejectedly and agreed to the man's proposal. And then she went on to look at the other seller's merchandise. It was only when Camille walked a little farther away that she was stopped by a woman who was selling toys. The stranger spoke up. "I heard that you are tuning up for work. Well, I can tell you that all these entrepreneurs promise to raise wages after a while, but not all of them keep their promises. Are you saying that the man I hired will cheat me too? I don't know anything about him. I'm talking about me. I've been working here for about 4 months now, and I've had no complaints. And I was promised a raise. They're still giving me a raise. I'm out of options, so I'm going to have to take my chances and work for this man." Camille left the market after talking to the saleswoman and went to the bus stop. The girl felt disappointed that things were going wrong for her. She thought she would find a job where she would get a great salary, but everything turned out to be exactly the opposite. Soon the bus pulled up. The girl entered the transportation and sat down on the empty seats, but 2 girls were already sitting against her and talking animatedly. Camille, to distract herself from bitter thoughts, involuntarily began to listen to the dialogue of strangers. Initially, Camille realized that they were 2 former classmates who had met after a while and were discussing their peers who were in the same class. Soon, Camille got tired of listening to the girls and wanted to turn her attention to the view from the window. So she heard what the brunette said, addressing her interlocutor. "Do you remember Miranda from our class, who always wore her older sister's clothes? We used to make fun of her for it all the time. You wouldn't believe it. I saw her the other day at the coffee shop where I was sitting with my son. I was stunned at how Katya looked originally. I didn't even believe it was her. I called out her name. Miranda smiled at me and moved to the table next to me. I stared at her with my mouth hanging open. It was a luxurious girl, which is immediately obvious that she visits expensive beauty salons. About the way she is dressed, I'm not talking at all. She has fashionable pants, a suit of such a coastal color, and in that to it in sandals. Practically on all fingers descendants and a gold ring. If in general to say, then in front of me was a stylish girl who knows her own price. Katya, whom we knew as the poorest in school. Probably married well, replied the person I was talking to. But you are wrong. She is not married, and is not even in a hurry. Then how did she succeed in life? The second girl asked, perplexed. This was curious for me too, and I asked her about it. Miranda answered that she earns money with her body. She said it so simply that I was very sweet of her answer. I asked her if doing it for money is disgusting. The answer was simple. Miranda said that now she can afford what she wants to do. And as for whether it is disgusting or not, she said that she treats it like a job. I was taken aback by this news. I don't even have the words to describe it. And further, Camille did not hear what the brunette said in response, because after the lecturer announced Camille's stop, the girl got off the bus and went home, thinking about the conversation between the 2 former classmates. Just then, the young woman saw a bench and sat down on it. She thought about this Miranda who earns money this way. Camille sat for a while as a call came from her neighbor. Wendy reported that Evelyn had become ill and had been rushed to the hospital. Then the neighbor added that Vanessa was at her place. Camille rose abruptly from the bench and ran home. The young woman immediately went to her, where she learned that Evelyn suddenly felt pain in her chest and called Wendy. She in turn called an ambulance, and the older woman was hospitalized. Camille was frightened. She was worried about the pensioner's condition. Camille called the hospital to find out how Evelyn was doing. But I answered that the woman was now in intensive care and all answers would not be available until the next day. Camille slumped down in her chair after the call. She already realized that tomorrow she would not go to any work because Vanessa had no one to leave her with. And also the girl realized that the pensioner would need medicine, which means that she would need finances. All these thoughts made the young woman cry. She was well aware that there was nowhere to go for help at the moment. The next day, Camille put her daughter in the stroller and went to the hospital. Camille mentally asked the Almighty to make Evelyn feel better. The girl was very afraid of losing her dear person. And here it was not that the old woman helped financially, but in another way, that the pensioner supported Camille morally and did not let her be discouraged. Soon Camille was already sitting in the hospital room opposite Evelyn, who had already been brought back from intensive care. The girl stroked the elderly woman's hand and asked her to hold on. The pensioner smiled at the ward and replied, "To me, don't worry, I made it through. But how will you be now?" "Alone, we are slowly leaving. I have an idea. Let's call your son to come here. It would be nice for you to see him. You're going about it the wrong way, sweetheart. I'm not going to die, so let your son come here when he gets a chance. And if you're implying that you're asking him for financial help, forget it. My son is having a hard time too. He's paying a mortgage, and he has 3 kids to feed, clothe, and shoe. All right, calm down. I didn't mean to ask him for help. I just thought it would do you good to see your son and get you back on your feet. The turkey thought I was screwed too," he said sternly. "And the woman." And then she said more softly, "All right, I knew you meant what you said out of the goodness of your heart. You'd better tell me that your job is going great. They said you'd be out in a week. So you have exactly 1 week to rest and get back into action," said Camille Savrasov. Having worked soon, Camille returned home with her daughter after the hospital. The young woman played with Utah for a while and then fed her and put her to bed. Afterward, she sat down on the couch and thought about her deception about Evelyn's job. Camille suddenly realized that she had not just told a lie to the older woman. It had been done intentionally. Camille had made the decision even then that she would go to the track to earn money. The realization that she would be selling her body no longer frightened the girl. Camille realized that she simply had no way out. It would be possible to go to work as a salesman, but the young woman already knew that she lacked the so-called salesmanship. This meant that Camille would have to pay for shortages or damaged goods. You could also work as a dishwasher, but it paid a pittance, and the other girl was not given, as there was no appropriate education. And so Camille decided to go to the highway. After a while, Evelyn was discharged from the hospital. The pensioner was taken away by Camille and her daughter. The girl fondly hugged the old woman and said that she would not allow her to be sick anymore. Evelyn smiled at her ward's words and promised. Evelyn smiled at her mentee's words and promised not to do it at all. A few more days passed after the discharge of the pensioner. Camille informed the elderly woman that she was going to work tomorrow. Evelyn asked the girl what her job was. Camille thought for a while and replied, "How can I put it to you so you understand? Basically, I have to go around the world. Basically, I have to go to businesses and collect signatures. Why collect them? I won't tell you yet, because it's gonna be a rotating assignment every few days. But the upside is that I'll be paid by the number of signatures, which means as soon as I complete the assignment, we'll have the money. That's a weird job. It's the first time I've heard of such a job," the older woman said, perplexed. "There's nothing strange about it. We are not living in the Stone Age after all. There are many specialties now that you have never even heard of. I'm not going to argue with you. You'd better tell me everything after the first day of work." So Camille is getting ready for work. Evelyn is puzzled and asks the mentees why the working day starts so late, and the time was around 15 o'clock. Camille quickly finds an answer and says that at this time, people are better in contact, and therefore the opportunity to collect more signatures increases. And then the girl added that this way she could earn more money. After a while, Camille stood on the highway. She, so that the pensioner did not guess anything, bought a mini skirt and a blouse with a deep neckline in advance. In all these clothes, the girl changed before going out on the highway. And here already Camille stands on the road and waits for the truck. Initially, cars stopped in front of her, and the drivers offered Camille a ride. However, the girl immediately decided that she needed chauffeurs who work as truckers. She herself did not understand why this decision came to her mind, and soon a truck slowed down in front of Camille. A man's head peeked out of the cab. The driver evaluated the girl and offered her a ride. Camille smiled and got into the driver's cab. The man once again looked at her traveling companion and said, "You must be new here, because I haven't seen you here before. And you? I see that you are already a regular here, if you know everyone," said the girl, trying to say so that her voice did not shake from excitement. However, the man as if caught her inner state, and so he asked, "You are obviously going to do this case for the first time. Don't worry, I won't hurt you. I know the rates, and I will pay even a little more than what is required." After a while, Camille was already out of the cab. The young woman adjusted her skirt, and at the same moment heard a man shouting to her that she was gorgeous and that he would like to meet her again. The girl reluctantly waved him off and walked slowly down the road. At the moment, Camille felt dirty. She couldn't stand the urge to shower to wash off the stranger's touch. But Camille forced herself to think about the fact that this was just a job that would help her and not live. The young woman came home. Already as before the evening, Evelyn looked anxiously at the ward, but the latter smiled amiably and said that there was the first earnings, and handed the pensioner the money. The old woman looked at the money and frightenedly said, "Wow, a decent amount for one working day. Today was just a lucky day. There was only one task that needed to be done today. So I tried to collect more signatures. I had to visit a lot of different agencies, but it was worth it. I don't like you coming home alone so late. You're a girl who knows what can happen. You better get fewer signatures and come home earlier. You know, there's a popular wisdom that you can't make all the money you want. That goes for you. We'll see. And now we should be happy that we have finances, and we will be able to buy, not a crib, so that the child sleeps not in a stroller. I'm also very tired as I've been walking a lot. So can I take a shower and go to bed?" Evelyn offered the girl to eat first, and then already take hygienic procedures, but Camille refused. The young woman wanted to actually take a shower and just forget about what she had done today of her own free will. As soon as Camille got to the bed and Evelyn, who had stayed with her tonight because Camille had come home late, was lying next to her, she felt ashamed. The landlady turned to the pensioner in a whisper and apologized for the late visit. The guest stroked her ward in response and asked her not to worry about nothing. Only after these words, Evelyn Camille calmly sighed. Immediately, she was struck by an electric shock. She realized that, doing such work, she had not thought about the most important thing, that she could get pregnant. Camille immediately decided that she would buy birth control tomorrow. The next day, Camille didn't go anywhere. What surprised the pensioner? The elderly woman asked why Camille had the day off today. The girl laughed in response and said that she would not have a job every day. Camille could not admit to Evelyn that today she simply did not want to go to the track, as there was still a residue on her soul from the way she had earned the money. It had been 2 days since Camille had given pleasure to the driver of the truck. It was only after that that the young woman decided to go out on the highway again. It was not an easy decision for her, and it was as if felt by Evelyn, who asked the girl where her office with the management was located. Camille realized that if she didn't make a precise schedule of the so-called work, the pensioner would sound the alarm and start to find out everything herself. So Camille decided that from this day forward, she would go out to the track once every 3 days. Camille had already been working in this way for 2 weeks. During that time, the girl bought her daughter a crib. Camille realized that she could not go on like this forever, and she comforted herself with the fact that it was only until her daughter grew up a little. And then the girl planned to give Anya to the kindergarten and herself to enroll in correspondence studies at the institute. And so Camille once again went out on the highway. She was waiting for a truck, and at the same time remembered the movie Pretty Woman. She liked this movie very much. The girl imagined herself in the role of the main character and dreamed that she would one day happen in her life. She wanted to meet a prince on a white horse who will pull her out of the swamp and will love not only her, but also Anya that. However, the young woman understood that this will not happen, as it only happens in movies, where the plot is invented to interest the viewer. And yet the girl still dreamed about it, realizing that it would not happen to her. Reflections and the girl was interrupted by a stopped car. Camille looked into the car, and from horror, the whole transport belonged to the husband of her neighbor. And this meant that now the man would start asking unnecessary questions about what she was doing on the highway. And in fact, the car door opened, and the neighbor looked out and said in surprise, "Camille, I didn't expect to see you here. What are you doing here?" "My wife told me you got a job." "That's right, Wendy. But it's my day off. And here I am waiting for a young man. Let's just say I have a date. I'll ask you not to tell your spouse about this. She'll be asking me all kinds of questions." "That's right." Laughing, the man said. And then he added, "My Wendy, curious person wants to know everything about everyone. Only that you chose a meeting with your boyfriend in a not very convenient place." "Yeah, I already realized that." As soon as the neighbor left, Camille breathed a sigh of relief. She'd expected a lot more questions from Wendy's husband. And there weren't many. Now the girl was only worried that the neighbor would not tell about their encounter on the road. Camille knew very well that Wendy often met with Evelyn and could tell the elderly woman that Camille was standing on the highway. And if the old woman found out about it, she wouldn't let up until she knew the whole truth. Camille, on the other hand, absolutely did not want Evelyn to know the way she made her money. A few days passed. Camille was once again standing on the highway, waiting for a truck. And then a beautiful black Jeep stopped in front of her. Two big guys jumped out of the cabin, who picked up the girl under the elbows and quickly pushed her into the car. The young woman did not even have time to shout, as she was already in the Jeep. And here an obese man turned to her from the front seat, who looked at her carefully and then asked her how long she had been doing this. Camille was startled and said she did not know what he was talking about. Her phrase made the stranger angry, and he spoke harshly. "You don't make a pie girl of yourself here. This is my territory. And I have already been informed that there is a young lady who works without taxes. And as it turns out, this young lady is you. So let's be honest. Otherwise, my boys are gonna have a different conversation with you." Camille, looking at the stranger, clearly realized that it was not worth lying to this man, because he would keep his word. The girl admitted that she had been out on the track for a little less than a month, and immediately added that she didn't do it every day. Hearing the young woman's retort, the man nodded contentedly. Then he said softly, "My name is Sam. Now I see that you're telling the truth, and you're a good girl, because you figured it out the first time. Now listen to what I have to say. You work on my territory, which means I have to pay tax to the treasury, like any decent citizen. But the treasury for you will not be the state, but my pocket. And in general, on the first of every month, you will bring me a sum of money to my address. If you don't, you realize you'll be dealing with my boys sitting next to you. Now tell me what you got." "I've got you scared," the girl muttered fearfully. "That's great. It's a pleasure doing business with you," said the man, and handed Camille a piece of paper on which was written an address and a sum of money. Camille looked at the entry and the window, and then said, But this is a large sum. It's almost half of what I'll earn in a month, and who has an easy life these days? You see, I'm not an unemployment fund. I want to eat good food too. And if you don't like this amount, go work at the factory as a laborer. I didn't force you to go to the highway, so you decide what's good for you. Anyway, this is a short conversation. Either you pay or you're out of here. And I'm waiting for your decision right now." "Okay, I'll do it." After that, the young woman was allowed out of the car. And as soon as Camille left the car, the Jeep drove off. Camille looked after the car and tears rolled down her cheeks. She realized that from now on, she would have to pay back almost half of the money she had earned. After this conversation, the young woman decided that today she would not work. After a while, the girl was already at home. She entered the apartment and saw the surprised face of the pensioner, who asked why she did not come so early. Camille glumly replied that the day had not gone well and there were no errands to run. Evelyn looked at the girl carefully and said sternly, Don't tell me fairy tales here. Tell me what really happened. I've known you for years, and I can see that you're worried. Camille was about to tell me the truth about where and how she made her money. But then she looked at Evelyn. She felt ashamed to tell the old woman. The girl collected the pensioner again and wrote tall tales that she had not been paid for her assignment today. Evelyn, inquisitive, looked at the interlocutor and helped. I hope you are not deceiving me. And about the fact that they paid, I understand that it's frustrating. But you can't be too upset about it. Every job has a slip-up. You had one. All right, calm down. Come on, I'll feed you and tell you how we fought the duck today. After Evelyn's words, the girl sighed with relief that the conversation on a dangerous topic was over. And then together with the pensioner went to the kitchen, where she listened to the elderly woman, who enthusiastically told how she spent the day's sonnets. The next day, Camille felt ill. She had a fever and a sore throat. Camille realized she had a cold. The young woman wrote about herself as she realized that it was impossible to be sicker now. After all, it was urgent to earn money to pay tribute to the track. Soon, Evelyn arrived at Camille's house and immediately announced that the labor activity would cease for the time being. Camille, as soon as she heard this with a sad smile, said that these were the words she had expected from Evelyn. In response, she said, "Don't think I'm such a predictable madam. I'll call a doctor and persuade the doctor to put you in the hospital. You don't have to do that. You're a doctor, so treat me with us agreed, but only sick. You will follow all my instructions." With a smile, said Evelyn, specifically addressing Daddy's ward. Camille recovered. 7 days later, she wanted to go to work again, but she was prevented from doing so by a pensioner. The elderly woman said that Camille had not yet recovered from her illness and needed to stay at home for a couple more days. There was nothing left for the girl to do, only to agree with Evelyn's decision. 2 days later, Camille was already standing on the highway. She was thinking about how to raise the necessary amount for Wendy. The young woman realized that she was not ready to go to work every day, but she also realized that it was necessary to give the money. And then one solution came to her mind, that one day it was necessary to double the number of clients, and only she thought about it as a truck stopped in front of her. The girl climbed into the cab and closed the door and then turned to the driver. Immediately, with fear, she faintly shuddered. In front of her sat the man who had robbed her of her innocence. The young woman only wanted to get out of the car. As the young man menacingly ordered her not to move from her seat, and in doing so grabbed her arm, Camille expelled and asked Stephen to let her go. The guy grinned and said that she had willingly got into the vehicle, and then added that you were a pious lady offering your services on the highway. And at that time you did not make a road out of yourself. Well, let's see what you have managed to learn during this time. I can't wait to reminisce with an old acquaintance who picked up during this time of experience. They're gonna let me out of the car. And don't even think that I'm going to have fun with you, and you shouldn't shame me, since it's only to your credit that I'm out here on the highway making a living. You're the one who took my virginity against my will, and I got pregnant afterward. I have a young daughter who needs food, diapers, skates, etc., and my allowance isn't very high. And you knew I was an orphanage kid with no one to stand up for me. So you used your power that day. I hate you. Are you telling me you had my baby? That's an unexpected twist. Don't tell me you want to get child support from me now. You make money on the highway. Somebody got you pregnant, Stephen said defiantly. Even though you're the biological father of the child, I can assure you that we don't need your money. You can choke on your finances, and the fact that you have a daughter you can forget forever. And let's stop this stupid conversation. There's only one thing I don't understand right now. I mean, you're such a big shot, and you work as a trucker. That doesn't make sense. Okay, I don't want to waste my time with you. Let me get out of the car. I can't take care of myself. Camille tried to open the door of the truck, but she was pulled to her by Stephen force and tried to lift her skirt. The girl screamed in desperation and began to fight back. At that moment, a voice came from behind them. It was a man speaking to the driver. "Let her go right now." "What are you doing?" "Partner, you know I like to have fun with the girls on the road," Stephen said in a perplexed voice. "You'll find another girl on the way," the man replied. "Christopher, you're my partner, but in this case I don't understand you," said Stephen, and let the girl go. In the meantime, Camille glanced back and looked at the protector. He was a handsome middle-aged man who looked her straight in the eye. The girl nodded gratefully and started to open the door of the truck, but she was called by her partner Stephen. The young woman looked back and glanced questioningly at the man. At that moment, he took out a purse and took out some bills, which he immediately handed to Camille with the words, "This is enough for you and the little girl for the first time, and try to change your trade. It doesn't suit you. You'd better find another way to make money. Now go home to your daughter, who's sure to miss you." "But I can't take the money." "Just like that," Camille said. "You can. Take it and go. If I see you on the road again, they'll think you're a fallen woman," Christopher said sternly. The young woman took the money and nodded gratefully once more and quickly got out of the car. As soon as the young woman left the cab, the truck started at the same moment. Camille looked at the car and thought about the stranger's words. Camille stood for a while longer and then headed home. The girl thought that there was only one trouble for today. It was the meeting with Stephen, but she was wrong. Camille had just arrived home, so she saw that her neighbor was visiting. Camille said hello to her, but she said nothing and hurried away to her room. The girl looked at her neighbor with a puzzled look. Then she turned to Evelyn. "What's the matter with Wendy? I came in and she just ran off. She didn't even say hello, and I thought we'd had no quarrel with her." The pensioner didn't say a word in response. The old woman asked if she had earned it today. Camille girl with a smile replied that she received a good sum for work, and with these words began to take out her purse to show her finances. Camille took out the money and handed it to Evelyn with words, "Here, take at least part of it. I suggest that tomorrow we go to the market together and buy some goodies. How about it?" The pensioner approached the girl and took the money. The old woman studied the bills for a long time and then asked her mockingly what was Camille's task today. Camille immediately sensed a trick in Evelyn's question. She answered that today she was collecting signatures for the advertisement. The old woman laughed and then with a sharp movement threw the money in the face of her ward with the words, "Who did you decide to deceive?" And after this phrase, the pensioner snatched from Camille's hands a bag from which to shake out the clothes. Evelyn picked up the fallen short skirt from the floor, as well as a blouse with a deep neckline. The older woman held out the clothes to the girl and said reproachfully, "This is your uniform. When you collect signatures from truckers, don't give me any more fairy tales. Wendy saw you today, driving down the highway with her husband. A neighbor told me you were wearing those clothes when you got into the truck. She also told me that her husband had seen you on the road before. By the way, he's been getting the same shit from you. That you were on a date. How could you do something like that? Tell me, don't you hate what you're doing? Can you imagine what your daughter will think of you when she finds out? I'm ashamed of what you're doing right now. It's like you stabbed me in the back. I didn't expect you to deceive me like that. You." Evelyn shoved things into Camille's hands. Camille and silently went to the kitchen, where she sat down at the table, and not in a coffin, and cried softly. Camille came in after her and tried to hug the older woman, but the latter pushed her away. The girl realized that she had caused her dear one unbearable heartache. She wanted to say something in her defense, but there were no words. Camille knelt down in front of Evelyn and spoke loudly. "It's my fault, and I admit it. I know I have offended you very much, and I have nothing to say for myself. Believe me, I did not go to the track for my own pleasure, but only to survive. Just don't pretend you're poor. There are plenty of single moms who find a way to make ends meet, and they don't go selling their bodies. Like you did, scold me with tears in my eyes directly killed Camille. I won't tell you anything else. I'll just leave now and try to forget that I ever met you. Small pennies. I'll pay you back. but we won't see each other anymore. And you can continue to go out for signatures on the highway," said the old woman and got up from the table. She wanted to take a step, but could not, for her knees were encompassed by Camille, who cried, sobbing profusely. For a few minutes the girl held Evelyn by the legs and then raised her face to the pensioner, and through her sobs said, "You may scold me with hurtful words. I bear it all. Just don't cut us out of your life. I promise you, on my knees, that I will never go out on the highway again. I don't know how I'll make a living yet, but believe me, I'll find a way. Just give me one chance. I beg you not to turn your back on us. You know very well that you're the only person we have close to us. I've only now realized what I can't lose. Believe me, I'm truly sorry for what I did, but I did not know how to get out of such a situation when there is no money, sometimes even for bread. I just ask you to believe that the money I brought today, it was not earned in this way. It was given to me by a stranger who saved me from Stephen. And that man gave me a good admonition too, that if he ever sees me on the highway again, he will consider me a fallen woman. He said the right words to you. All right, baby, if you promise me it won't happen again, we'll stick together. We'll try to forget this month completely, like it never happened. Now go see your daughter. I think she's awake," quietly spoke the old woman and stroked the girl's head. In the evening of that day, when the Evelyn players had already left, Camille thought about life. She realized that she had made a promise to the pensioner, and the girl knew that she would keep her word in any case, even if she had to starve. And at the moment, Camille was concerned with another question: where to find a part-time job. Camille spent a long time in her thoughts, and when she looked at the clock, she was surprised that already at 0:00 the young woman came to her daughter and admired the baby. Then the girl shared the bed and lay down. And at that moment, for some reason, she remembered the departure of her neighbor. Now Camille understood why Wendy had treated her so dryly. Camille decided that she had to talk to the neighbor tomorrow. 10 days passed. Camille kept her promise to Evelyn. Now when the pensioner came to Camille, the girl went to look for a job. And soon she was lucky to get a job as a dishwasher in a kindergarten. The salary was small, but Camille was happy with the money, and the schedule suited her. Another week flew by and Camille had a day off. The young woman decided to take her child for a walk at lunchtime. She had already started to get things to dress. The doorbell rang. Camille was surprised by it, as she was not expecting anyone, and especially Evelyn knew that she had a day off today and did not come these days. The girl then thought that was right. A neighbor came over to chat and hurriedly opened the door. However, it was not Wendy who turned out to be the evening, but a stranger who held a gorgeous bouquet of pink roses and a large fluffy bear. Camille looked at the man with surprise and immediately recognized him as the man who had given her money for nothing. The landlady was embarrassed to see Stephen's partner and spoke crumpled. "Hello, you must be here for the debt. How did you find me? You have a way of keeping guests on the doorstep. I'm glad you remembered me, though. That means you left a good impression of me. I'm not used to letting strangers into my home." "Oh my goodness," the man exclaimed, and then went on. "We're the ones who don't know each other. Perhaps you don't remember my name, but I remember yours perfectly well because I heard your whole conversation with Stephen. Only after I heard what that man did to you, that I did not let him do it again. My name is Christopher, by the way. I remember Stephen calling you Christopher. All right, come on in, but I'm warning you right away, I don't have the money to pay you back at the moment. And one more thing, I don't do that trade anymore. If you'd like to collect your debt in this equivalent, I gave the money freely and from the bottom of my heart. I really wanted you to stop doing this business," said the man and handed the girl flowers and a toy, and then crossed the threshold. "But I don't understand why you came to me," the young woman asked in surprise. "That's an interesting question, but I will answer you now. Initially agree that you will not call me you. Otherwise I feel like an old man. I'm only 31 years old. Now to answer your question, When I saw you in the car, I was struck by your looks. Then I thought you'd disappear and all my thoughts of you would be gone. But as time went on, I kept thinking about you. Then I realized that Cupid's arrow had accidentally pierced my heart, and thus I stand beside you." After these words, the crying of a child was heard from the room. The young woman rushed into the room. She put the flowers and the toy on the bed and picked up her daughter in her arms. Following the mistress of the apartment followed the guest. The man looked at the little girl and softly said, "It seems to me that with a toy I hurried. You should have bought another set of rattles. Since your daughter is still a baby, you shouldn't have bought anything at all. By the way, my daughter's name is Vanessa. She's 5 months old. I forgot to ask you how you found me. Stephen gave me a beautiful name. He gave me the street, the house, the entrance. I had to find the apartment on my own." "Very interesting. Can you tell me why Stephen is a trucker? I mean, his father's not a poor man." "I'd be happy to share. He told me why it happened. But first I'd like you to offer me a seat." "That's what hospitable hostesses usually do," the man said with a smile. The young woman hummed with embarrassment and offered the guest a chair, while she sat down on the bed with the baby. The girl turned to Christopher and looked questioningly at the man. The guest realized that he was expected to answer, and so began his story from the narration of the new acquaintance. The landlady learned that Stephen's father's business had failed and had to take a large loan from the bank to restore his own business. However, the finances did not help. Eventually, the business went bust, and there was a debt to the bank. And then it was decided to sell Stephen's apartment to pay off the debt. The young man's father could not bear it all and died suddenly. Stephen was left without money for life, and he had nothing to pay for his studies at the institute. So the guy dropped out of college and got a job as a trucker. Christopher told all this while looking at Camille, who was listening attentively. When the man finished the story, the girl smiled mysteriously, which did not hide from the guest, and he asked, "You must be gloating." "Not at all. I just think that Stephen will now understand how to live on a simple salary and not boast about daddy's money." "You're right about that. Stephen is the sole earner in the family now, since his mother never worked after marrying his father. And from what I understand, my partner's mom isn't going to do it. But I'm not interested in that anymore." "Me neither. We were gonna go for a walk. Go with the duck. You won't mind that. So you're gonna tell me about yourself." And soon the couple and the baby were walking in the park. Christopher told the girl he lived in a one-room apartment. He has been working as a trucker for 6 years. He likes this occupation, and also said that he was married. But the family life did not work out. He said that he likes to guess Japanese crossword puzzles and dreams of visiting the Northern Territory in the future. Hearing the man's last wish, Camille laughed and said, "Everyone wants to go to the south, but you want to go to the north. You are strange. It's very simple. My parents are from there, and they often talk about it. If only you could hear how enthusiastically my mother and father described the north. Why am I telling you this now? I'll get to know them. You'll hear it firsthand. What makes you think I'm going to meet them? Wait a minute. Don't be so quick to say no. It's not like I'm asking you to get into bed. I just want to start by courting you. And if everything turns out well, then we can create a family with you in the future." From the lack of the young man, with a laugh uttered Camille. The couple walked with the child for a while, and then Christopher walked the girl home, helped her carry the stroller to the 3rd floor, and at parting asked permission to call and visit. The girl responded to the young man with consent. A month passed as Christopher visited Camille for the first time. During this time, the couple met several times. They often called each other. The man always inquired about Vanessa's accomplishments to the young woman at each call. It was a pleasure. It didn't take long to fly by. Another month, Camille came home from work and was surprised to hear someone in her apartment speaking in a man's voice. She listened and recognized Christopher's voice. The girl went into the room and saw the man talking sweetly with Evelyn. The old woman saw the girl and said with a smile that Camille had come to visit them. Camille looked at Christopher with surprise, and he immediately knelt down on one knee in front of Camille, took out a small box from the pocket of his jeans, which he opened and handed to the girl with the words, "Here I am making you a marriage proposal. I met Evelyn without your permission and told this worthy woman how I love you. She said she would bless us only after you gave your consent. Now my fate is in your hands." Camille looked at Evelyn, confused initially, and then shifted her gaze to the man. The girl took a box from which she pulled out a thin wedding ring. She slipped the piece of jewelry onto her finger and admired it. Taking her hand aside, then looked at Christopher again and asked quietly, "What about my job at the track? That's what you gave me, isn't it? You're going to remind me of that someday, aren't you? What kind of nonsense are you talking about? I believe I met you in a more romantic setting, like the day I first walked into this apartment. Make it look like I got the wrong address. And by the way, Stephen is no longer my partner. I asked management to do that, and they'd gone along with it. Now I have a partner who's not considered for the girls. He's a model family man. That's what I'm going to be. As soon as you say yes, what can I tell you? Naturally, I say I want to be your wife," the girl said happily. And at the same moment she found herself in the arms of a man. Christopher tenderly kissed the young woman and quietly in her ear said, "You have now made me with the happiest person. I love you madly, and I will never hurt you or Anya. I will do everything possible so that you do not need anything. We will be a model family. And now you can't refuse to meet your relatives, who already know about you and are eagerly waiting for me to introduce you to them. I understand that you are preparing me to talk to my father and mother about the wonderful northern region, as well as hinting that we will have a joint trip to those lands. That's a good point. And you are not only beautiful, but also smart." Laughing, Christopher replied, and kissed the young woman on the lips.